Jane, one of the volunteers, nodded thoughtfully. It seems like every family mentions a problem, but none are specific. Maybe they're hiding something, she suggested, setting the stage for deeper investigation. It was noted that Bruno had been returned by different families each time with vague explanations. One report mentioned he was too aggressive, another claimed he was too timid. None seemed credible enough to warrant his recurring abandonment. The more they examined, the more obvious it became that something mysterious was happening. There was no clear clue yet, but the pattern of his abandonment was deeply troubling. Mary initiated a phone call to Bruno's most recent owner, hoping to get some clear answers. The phone rang a few times before a woman answered. "Hello, is this Mrs. Anderson?" Mary asked. "Yes," replied the voice on the other end. "I'm calling from the shelter about Bruno." "We were hoping you could provide some insight into why you returned him," Mary said, her tone direct but gentle. The discussion over the phone revealed little initially, but Mary sensed hesitation in the owner's voice. "Well, he just didn't fit with our family," Mrs. Anderson said nervously. Mary pressed a bit harder, trying to break through the reluctance. There had to be more to the story, Mary thought. But Mrs. Anderson remained vague and evasive, ending the call abruptly without providing any helpful details. Determined to find out more, Mary visited the last known address of Bruno's previous owners. Driving up to the house, she noted its neatly trimmed lawn and perfect flower beds. She walked to the door and knocked firmly. Nothing. She knocked again, louder this time. Still no answer. She felt a growing sense of urgency. Clearly, something was seriously wrong, and she wasn't leaving without more answers. The house appeared well maintained, but nobody came to the door after several knocks. Out of options, Mary peered through a side window but saw no movement inside. It seemed empty, devoid of life, making the situation even more puzzling. She jotted down notes and left a card in case someone returned. Determined to gather more information, she decided to try talking to the neighbours before leaving the area. Not giving up easily, Mary knocked on a few neighbours' doors to gather more information. After a few unanswered doorbells, an elderly woman finally opened her door a crack. "Excuse me, I'm from the local shelter. I'm trying to learn more about the Andersons and their dog," Mary explained. The woman seemed wary, but mentioned she had heard some strange noises and dogs crying frequently from the house. One neighbour mentioned strange noises and the sound of dogs crying frequently coming from the house. "It was peculiar," the elderly woman said. "Especially at night, you could hear barking and whining. But every time I tried to see what was happening, the Andersons would shut their curtains." Mary thanked the woman before leaving, now more convinced than ever that something sinister was at play. With this new piece of information from the neighbour, Mary decided it was time to involve animal control for further investigation. She called the local office and explained Bruno's situation and his recurring returns. The officer on the other end, Officer Sanchez, listened carefully. "We can conduct welfare checks on the property," he said. Mary felt a glimmer of hope as they agreed on a plan to proceed. Animal control officers promised to conduct welfare checks on the Anderson property, raising Mary's hopes. Officer Sanchez confirmed that they would start with an unannounced visit to ensure everything was accounted for. Mary thanked him and hung up, feeling slightly better. A few days later, she received a call from Officer Sanchez with updates. "We didn't find anything wrong on our first visit, but we'll keep checking," he assured her. Back at the shelter, a volunteer named John was going through Bruno's paperwork again. The more he looked, the more he realized there was a pattern. "Hey Mary, take a look at this," he said, spreading out the documents on the table. Each time Bruno was returned, the paperwork noted similar issues, but what caught John's eye was something much more telling about the families and their locations. John noticed that all the families who had returned Bruno lived within a small radius around the same town. "It's weird, isn't it? All these addresses are pretty close to each other," John pointed out. Mary nodded, intrigued. "That is odd. There has to be a reason," she said thoughtfully, marking each address on a map. The proximity of these homes suggested something suspiciously close-knit. This information prompted Mary to plot the addresses on a map. What she saw gave her chills. All the families lived within just a few blocks of each other. It's like they're all connected somehow, Mary mused aloud. The tight clustering of addresses sparked a sense of unease. She knew the next step was to visit each of these families to get first-hand accounts of their experiences with Bruno. She prepared a list and set off for the first address. Knocking on the door, she introduced herself and explained her mission. The family seemed taken aback, but agreed to talk. Bruno was just different, they hesitated. Mary pried gently, hoping to uncover more about what had been happening. The first family Mary visited opened up about the inexplicable fear Bruno showed towards certain people. He was terrified of our neighbour, even though the guy never did anything, the father explained. Mary listened intently, noting the peculiarities. Did you ever find out why? She asked. The family shook their heads. No, he just seemed scared all the time, the mother added, deepening the mystery surrounding Bruno's behaviour. Continuing her visits, Mary met with another family who mentioned receiving an anonymous threat to return Bruno. We got this letter one day, the lady of the house said, showing Mary a crumpled piece of paper. The note was brief but menacing, urging them to send Bruno back or else. Did you report this? Mary asked. We were too scared to do anything, the husband admitted, leaving Mary more determined than ever. Feeling unnerved by the threat against the second family, Mary knew she had to take a different approach to dig deeper into this mystery. She couldn't rely solely on the family's accounts. Calling in a favour from an old friend in the police department seemed like the best next step. She dialed Detective Harris's number, hoping he could provide some insight. I need your help with something unusual, she said. Mary explained the situation to Detective Harris, emphasising the need for discretion. Can you run background checks on Bruno's previous owners? She asked. Harris didn't hesitate. Sure, I'll see what I can find, he replied. Mary thanked him and hung up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. With the police now involved, she hoped they could uncover something that could explain the sinister pattern surrounding Bruno's many returns. Detective Harris called back after a few days. We did find a few minor offences in their backgrounds, he stated, but nothing that raises any major red flags. Mary felt a mix of relief and frustration. While it meant none of Bruno's previous owners were criminals, it also meant the mystery remained unsolved. We're still missing something, Mary thought, her mind racing for the next step in their investigation. John approached Mary with a new idea. Why don't we set up a hidden camera to monitor Bruno's interactions with potential new owners? He suggested. Surprised, Mary considered it. You think it'll help? She asked. At least we'll see if there's any specific thing that sets him off, John replied. Mary nodded slowly, realising that this might be the way to uncover the truth behind Bruno's troubled returns. After mulling over John's proposal, Mary reluctantly agreed. All right, let's do it, she said. Together, they installed the hidden camera in the shelter's meeting room, ensuring it was discreet but captured all angles. Let's hope this gives us some answers, Mary thought as she turned on the camera. The plan was to observe Bruno's behaviour with new visitors without any external interference, leaving the camera to do its work. Over the next few days, they observed the footage. Bruno acted normally around most people, wagging his tail and appearing friendly. However, when specific people walked in, his demeanour changed drastically. He'd whimper, bark, and pull away as though terrified. Mary observed the odd behaviour, perplexed. What's different about these people? She wondered aloud, scribbling down notes and marking the timestamps on the footage where Bruno acted out. John suggested they examine the people Bruno reacted fearfully towards. Look at these clips, he said, pointing to the screen. Notice anything similar? Mary watched carefully and realised something. They all seem to have a similar appearance, she observed. John nodded. Exactly. There must be a connection, he said, Deciding they needed to dig deeper into these specific visitors' backgrounds to uncover any underlying commonalities. Determined to find a connection, Mary decided to share the footage with her police contact. "I'll get this over to Detective Harris," she said. John agreed, hoping the police could uncover something they hadn't seen. Mary handed over the recordings with detailed notes about the timestamps. "Maybe they'll see something we missed," she murmured, wondering if the police could finally crack open the mysterious link between Bruno's fear and these specific visitors. A few days later, Detective Harris called Mary. "We found something interesting," he said. The people Bruno fears matched descriptions from several local crime reports. Mary felt a chill run down her spine. "So, they're not just random visitors," she whispered. "Seems like it," Harris responded. "There's an unsettling connection here." Mary's mind raced as she tried to piece together this new information with what they already knew. Puzzled, Mary and John sat in the staff room brainstorming. "What could these people have in common besides their looks?" Mary asked. John shrugged, clearly stumped. "Maybe they're involved in something sinister? Or perhaps they're all part of a group." They jotted down all possible scenarios, from coincidences to criminal activities, desperately trying to find the thread tying these people together in connection to Bruno's reactions. Mary decided to revisit the neighbour who mentioned the noises to get more specific details. After knocking on a few doors, the elderly woman answered again. "Hello, it's Mary from the shelter," she started. The neighbour nodded in recognition. "I need to ask about the people you saw visiting the Anderson house," Mary continued. The woman's eyes narrowed, but she let Mary in to talk. "There was one man I saw frequently," the neighbour began. "There was this one man," the neighbour said, choosing her words carefully. "He visited often, always at odd hours, sometimes late at night." Mary leaned in, sensing a potential breakthrough. "Can you describe him?" she asked eagerly. The neighbour nodded, describing his appearance in detail. "He always seemed in a hurry, and Bruno would cry whenever he was there," the woman added. Mary felt a flicker of hope, believing they might be onto something significant. Officer Michael had been following the girl for hours now, staying at a safe distance from her car. His patrol car trailed several blocks behind while he kept an eye on her every move. He noticed she seemed on edge, checking her mirrors constantly. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was aware of being followed. Determined, he made sure to stay inconspicuous, gripping the steering wheel tightly as his mind raced. Finally, his colleagues at the station had finished their background check on her, but they had found nothing noteworthy. "She's clean, Mike," his partner Eric relayed over the radio. This didn't sit well with Michael. "There's something off," he murmured into the mic, keeping his eyes on her car as it sped down the highway. The station buzzed with static before Eric responded, "Stay on her. Let's see where she goes." After driving for about 30 minutes, she finally arrived at an old abandoned warehouse and quickly ran inside of it. Michael parked a few blocks away, opting to follow on foot. He approached the warehouse cautiously, blending into the shadows cast by the flickering streetlights. As he got closer, he could hear the echo of his footsteps on the cracked pavement. The dilapidated building loomed large, a sense of foreboding settling in. Michael knew the risks of going after her alone, and so he radioed for backup, but they were too far away to arrive in time to help him. "ETA's about 20 minutes, came Eric's voice through the static. Michael sighed, knowing he had no choice but to proceed. "I'm going in," he informed his partner, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Releasing his breath slowly, he approached the warehouse entrance. He hesitated, but went in after her anyway. He nervously went into the warehouse through a broken window, careful not to make a sound. His eyes adjusted to the dim light inside, revealing broken machinery and scattered debris. He moved silently, each step deliberate, listening for any signs of movement. He could barely hear his own breath over the pounding of his heart, the seriousness of the situation weighing on him. He carefully started checking for signs everywhere near the entrance of the warehouse to determine where the girl went. His flashlight beam swept across the dusty floor, revealing tracks that led deeper into the building. She couldn't have gone far, he thought, making sure not to disturb anything. Michael moved with purpose, his senses heightened as he picked up on every creak and distant noise, hoping to catch up with her quickly. Michael found tracks on the dusty floor leading deeper into the warehouse. He felt a chill run down his spine as his flashlight illuminated their path. Each footprint appeared fresh, suggesting she had only just passed through. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, filled with dust and the eerie silence. He couldn't help but feel like he was being watched, the walls seeming to close in around him as he proceeded. He followed the tracks, his heart pounding, feeling the tension rise with every step. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, the faint echoes of his footsteps amplifying the quiet. "Stay focused," he told himself, pushing forward. The beam from his flashlight flickered slightly, adding to the unease that gnawed at him. He felt exposed, every sound magnified in the cavernous space, the girl's presence just out of reach, leading him farther in. Suddenly, he saw a flicker of light from a room at the end of the corridor. Michael tightened his grip on his flashlight, his pace quickening. The light offered a glimmer of hope, a potential answer to this unsettling chase. He took a deep breath, steeling himself as he approached. He could faintly hear voices intertwined with echoes of the warehouse. Each word seemed strained and hushed, adding to the already tense atmosphere. He approached cautiously, hearing faint voices from within. Pressing himself against the wall, he stepped closer, trying to catch snippets of the conversation. The words were muffled, but filled with urgency. "We need to move fast," one voice said. Michael's pulse quickened. He peeked through a crack in the door, seeing shadows moving. This is it, he thought, preparing himself for what he might find behind that door. Michael peered through a crack in the door, catching sight of a group of people seemingly engaged in an argument. The tension in their voices was evident, even muffled as it was by the old wooden door. He strained to hear more, his eyes inching closer to the narrow opening. "We can't keep this up!" One voice hissed, making Michael's heart race as he realized this was bigger than he thought. Deciding to get evidence, Michael pulled out his phone and started recording the scene. He focused the camera lens on the gap, capturing the heated argument as the group gestured wildly. "We've got to move fast," one of them said, causing Michael to make a note of the urgency. He knew he'd need this footage when backup arrived. Hopefully, it's enough to blow this wide open, he thought. Mary and John watched the recording from Michael's hidden camera in stunned silence. Every word, every gesture on the screen painted a dark picture. "I can't believe this," Mary whispered, shaking her head as the scene unfolded. John remained silent, eyes glued to the screen. The tension in the room was palpable, each second dragging like an eternity as the implications of what they were seeing sunk in. The footage revealed a clandestine dogfighting ring operating on the outskirts of their town. The group argued about logistics, clearly experienced in their disturbing activities. Michael's camera had caught them discussing upcoming events and the dogs they would use. "These monsters," Mary said, her voice quivering with anger. John clenched his fists, a steely resolve forming. They knew they had stumbled onto something horrific, something much bigger than they had anticipated. Watching the footage made it horrifyingly clear that Bruno's terror stemmed from being used as a bait dog in these gruesome events. "No wonder he's so scared," Mary said, her voice breaking. John nodded grimly, understanding now why Bruno was so traumatized and fearful. The footage showed how these dogs were treated, making it evident that Bruno had endured unthinkable pain and fear at the hands of these people. This revelation clarified why Bruno's fear was so extreme and also explained the threats his previous owners received. They wanted to make sure the dog didn't talk figuratively, John said, piecing it together. Mary nodded, finally understanding the pressure and fear Bruno's owners lived under. They saw now why everyone had returned him promptly, too scared to face the consequences of defying the terrifying figures behind the fighting ring. Determined to take action, Mary contacted the local authorities with the evidence they had gathered. "We need to act fast," she urged the officer on the other end of the line. She detailed the findings and explained Bruno's connection to the ring. "We have enough to launch a raid," the officer confirmed. Mary hung up, feeling a flicker of hope for justice. The wheels were finally in motion to rescue Bruno and others. A coordinated raid was quickly organised to take down the dog-fighting ring for good. Michael and his team readied themselves, running through the plan and making sure everything was in place. "We go in at dawn," the chief said, laying out the strategy. There was a feeling of resolve in the air. Everyone knew how critical this operation was, not just for Bruno, but for all the dogs suffering in silence. Michael led the charge, breaking down the warehouse door with his team of officers. They moved swiftly, their training taking over as they secured the area. Inside, they found the suspects caught completely off guard. "Police! Everyone down!" Michael shouted, his commanding voice echoing through the large space. The officers fanned out, ensuring no one escaped. The culmination of their efforts was about to pay off. The suspects were caught off guard, and several arrests were made on the spot. Michael felt a rush of accomplishment as he handcuffed one of the ringleaders. "You're not getting away with this," he muttered. The officers rounded up the others, securing the scene. As the adrenaline ebbed, Michael looked around, feeling content they had struck a significant blow against the cruel operation. Justice, it seemed, was finally being served. The officers discovered several injured and traumatized dogs, including Bruno, in a hidden room. The scene was heart-wrenching. The room was dimly lit, and the dogs cowered in corners, their eyes filled with fear and pain. Bruno lay trembling in a crate, whimpering softly. "We need to get them out of here now," Michael said urgently, as the officers worked quickly to free the dogs from their confinement. Rescue workers swiftly moved in to provide immediate care to the dogs. The staff from the shelter were on site, working efficiently to transport the animals to safety. "Keep them calm," one of the rescue workers instructed, gently placing a blanket over a severely injured dog. Bruno was lifted carefully onto a stretcher. For the first time in a long while, there seemed to be a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Michael felt a wave of relief seeing Bruno being carried out gently by a caretaker. He had feared the worst for Bruno and the other dogs, but now there was a chance for recovery. "Hang in there, buddy," Michael murmured as he watched the dogs being loaded into the rescue vans. This rescue operation, though just the beginning, brought a sense of hope and redemption for these traumatized animals. Mary, John, and the shelter staff prepared to receive Bruno and the other rescued dogs. They set up clean, warm spaces and gathered medical supplies, ready to provide the care these animals desperately needed. "Is everything ready?" Mary asked, her voice filled with determination. "We're all set," John confirmed. The team braced themselves for the arrival of the rescue vans, knowing that their work was far from over. Back at the shelter, the staff worked tirelessly to help Bruno recover from his ordeal. Veterinarians examined each dog, treating wounds and providing necessary medication. "He's a fighter," one vet commented, gently petting Bruno's head. The shelter team made sure Bruno had a safe, comfortable space to begin his long journey toward healing. "Take it one day at a time," Mary advised her team, knowing patience was key. With patience and care, Bruno began to show signs of trust and recovery over time. He started eating regularly and even wagged his tail occasionally. The staff noted every small victory, celebrating each sign of progress. "He's coming around," one caretaker said, smiling as Bruno responded to a gentle pat. The journey was slow, but every day brought new hope and a step closer to Bruno's full recovery. Mary reached out to a reputable dog behaviourist to help Bruno overcome his trauma. "We've done what we can, but he needs a specialist," she explained to John. The behaviourist, known for working with severely traumatised animals, agreed to take on Bruno's case. "We'll start with regular sessions and take it from there," the behaviourist said, instilling a renewed sense of hope that Bruno would eventually heal. Regular sessions with the behaviourist helped Bruno build confidence and regain his playful nature. Slowly but surely, Bruno started to show positive changes. He's trusting again, the behaviourist confirmed, smiling as Bruno responded warmly to his cues. The shelter staff felt a collective sense of relief. Each session brought visible improvements, and the once fearful dog began to rediscover joy and trust in the human touch. The shelter organised a community event to find loving homes for Bruno and the other rescued dogs. Flyers were distributed and social media buzzed with excitement. "We need to find them the perfect families," Mary emphasised. The event day was bright and bustling with compassionate individuals looking to adopt. "Let's make today count," John said, setting up booths and ensuring everything was prepared for the potential adopters. Unexpectedly, Bruno formed a special bond with a kind elderly couple who attended the event. They spent time with him, offering gentle pets and kind words. "He's perfect," the woman whispered to her husband, who nodded in agreement. "We'd love to take him home," they told Mary, who smiled warmly. Bruno seemed equally delighted, wagging his tail enthusiastically, signalling the start of a promising new chapter in his life. Before they could finalise the adoption, Mary revealed the harrowing details of Bruno's past to the couple. "We think you should know," she began. She described Bruno's repeated returns, his trauma from being used as bait in dogfights, and the cruel threats previous owners had faced. The couple listened intently, their faces reflecting a mix of sorrow and compassion. Clearly, Bruno had endured unimaginable hardship, but they didn't seem deterred. The couple was deeply moved by Bruno's story. The woman wiped away a tear. "That poor boy," she murmured. Her husband nodded, determined. "We've gone through tough times ourselves. We understand what it means to need a second chance," he said. Bruno, sensing the emotional shift, nudged the woman's hand gently. "We're more determined than ever to give him the love and home he deserves," the woman said, her voice filled with resolve. They agreed to visit Bruno regularly at the shelter before officially taking him home. "Let's get him used to us first," the man suggested, and Mary agreed it was a good idea. Each afternoon the couple arrived punctually, spending hours with Bruno. They brought his favourite treats and toys, gradually building his trust. "He gets happier every time he sees you," Mary observed one day, noting Bruno's growing excitement and comfort around them. During each visit, Bruno grew more attached to the couple. His eyes would light up and his tail wagged furiously whenever they entered the room. "Look at him, so happy to see us," the woman exclaimed. They played fetch, went for walks, and even sat quietly together, enjoying simple companionship. Bruno's initial timidness faded, replaced by a growing bond that became unmistakably strong. The couple couldn't wait to make him a permanent part of their family. After ensuring Bruno's readiness, the couple officially adopted him, promising to take care of him forever. "This is it, buddy," the man said as he signed the papers. Bruno sat by his feet, tail wagging furiously. "Welcome home, Bruno," the woman added, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. Mary handed them the adoption certificate. "Congratulations, he's all yours," she said warmly. They left the shelter with Bruno eagerly trotting alongside them to his new life. With tears of joy, the shelter staff bid farewell to Bruno, knowing he was finally going to a safe and loving home. "Take care, boy," John whispered, giving him one last pat. Mary waved as the couple drove away with Bruno sitting happily in the back seat. "We did it," she said, feeling a mixture of sadness and pride. The staff hugged, their job of finding Bruno a loving home finally complete. Bruno was starting his happiest chapter yet. Months later, the couple sent an update to the shelter, sharing Bruno's happiness and love-filled life. "He's thriving," the letter read. Attached were photos of Bruno running in their yard, curled up on the couch and playing with neighbourhood dogs. Mary smiled as she read the letter aloud to the staff. "Looks like he found his perfect family," she said, feeling deeply satisfied. The snapshots showed a new, joyous life for Bruno, filled with love and care. The staff felt immense satisfaction knowing their efforts had changed Bruno's life for the better. All those sleepless nights were worth it, John said, recalling the investigation and rescue. They posted Bruno's success story on their bulletin board, symbolising hope and resilience. "Let's keep this momentum going," Mary urged, inspiring the team. The entire shelter buzzed with a renewed energy, motivated by Bruno's turnaround to continue their essential work in rescuing and rehabilitating animals in need. Bruno's story inspired the community to take a stand against animal cruelty and dogfighting. Local news picked up his tale, highlighting the shelter's hard work and the couple's commitment. Volunteers poured in, wanting to make a difference. "Bruno's story really moved us," one new volunteer said. Donations increased and awareness campaigns spread throughout the town. "It's incredible how one dog can change so many lives," Mary marvelled. The community's response was both heartwarming and promising. Mary and John continued their advocacy, ensuring every dog, like Bruno, found the love they deserved. "This is just the start," Mary said at a local event, promoting awareness about animal cruelty. John nodded, adding, "Every dog deserves a fighting chance for happiness." Their work inspired others to get involved. They hosted workshops, organised rescue missions, and tirelessly campaigned for better animal protection laws. Thanks to their relentless efforts, many more animals found their forever homes.